How's it going?
How are you?
I'm great. First off, I heard that you actually flew here, so that's pretty great. Actually, I'm playing today.
You're letting me back on an airplane, man.
That's awesome. Good for you. And my question is, this is actually my first Star Wars celebration as well. And for you, what's it like to first follow the Emperor and share the stage with people like Luke Skywalker, Leia, C-3PO? What's that like for you as a fan and as a filmmaker?
It's been great. I mean, honestly, like as I talked about Peking before, this has been in my life as long as I can remember. And you know, I remember maybe one thing before Star Wars, and that was Jaws. My life has been defined by the movies of my youth, and I invested a lot of myself, a lot of my time, a lot of my imagination in the world of Star Wars. And then I remember in 1983 when Return of the Jedi happened, I had what could only be described as the closest feeling to a midlife crisis that I've ever had in my life. I was 13, I went to see it with Ernie O'Donnell and his father and Sam Holland. We saw it at the Middletown Multiplex in the big theater. Movie ends and stuff. I was like, what are we going to do now? And Ernie's like, we'll go get pizza. And I was like, no, what are we going to do? Star Wars is done. And he was just like looking at me like, what are you, dumb? Like, it'll be something else. But to me, it is so much more. He didn't play with the figures and shit. It was religion to me. So that stayed alive. That didn't go anywhere. And even though they weren't making any new movies, periodically you'd see stuff. They'd make an Ewok movie on TV or something like that. But generally speaking, things were kind of dormant, you know, in terms of the mainstream. There was a point where people just weren't talking about Star Wars anymore. There were 3 movies that happened when we were kids, and that was that. And that point was right when I was writing Clerks, 1992. When I was writing the script for Clerks, there was a moment, one of the first scenes I ever wrote. It's not the first one. The first one was Randall going, I don't appreciate your ruse, man. The second scene I ever wrote in Jersey. That first scene I wrote in Vancouver while I was in film school. The second scene I ever wrote was the Star Wars scene. And I wrote that when I got back to Highlands, when I moved back into my parents' house, dropped out of film school. And when I went home, and honestly, this is fucking strange, it's 20 years ago right now. I dropped out of film school from Vancouver in July of '92. It's 20 years later, it's August of 2012. So essentially in my timeline, I don't keep a diary or anything, but if I went back to right around this time, August, I'm probably writing Clerks at this point 20 years ago. And as I'm writing it, I'm going like, well, I want to make a movie about people I never see on the screen. You know, I'm a big movie buff and I love watching imagination movies and shit where they go into space and fight fucking Sith Lords. But at the same time, every once in a while you want to look up, see yourself represented. Even in Star Wars, the only representation I had was fucking Porkins, and we know what happened to him. So, you know, you want to see yourself, your friend, shit like that, and that's where Clerks came from. I was like, I perceived a hole, a deficit, and I wanted to fill that hole with myself and my friends. Like, I'd go to the movies, never see us up on the screen, and then I was like, one day I want to make a movie about us, and we did, and that became Clerks. And as I was writing that movie about us, what I would write about is the shit that we talked about. And I didn't talk about Star Wars that much with Brian Johnson. He wasn't into it. He's my friend. He's on that show Comic Book Men, Brian and Walter. They've been my friends for years. He wasn't a big Star Wars guy. We didn't have that in common, but Walter's a big comic book guy, so I could talk Star Wars to him. But whenever I did, like, whenever he let a little bit of his geek out, and then I let my full geek out, you know, it's like I imagine, like, if you go into a bathroom, you're looking for some fucking, you know, glory hole action, put your foot up the stall. They don't have a word for glory hole? She's in ships? Okay, I thought I drove you off the stage. She's like, oh, I give up. Glory hole. Fuck you, Mr. Southwest Airlines. Okay. All right, so my friends, Walter and Brian didn't talk about Star Wars too much, but my new friend, who I met when I went to film school, a gentleman by the name of Scott Mosier. Scott, for those who are like, why is Yes, you get an applause. Scott would become my producer in a year or two, and also to this day, we do a show together, a podcast called Smodcast. Scott was the first person that I sat down with and had the prototypical conversation that became Dante and Randall in Clerks. We were at a coffee shop right downstairs from the Vancouver Film School. Vancouver Film School, all in one building. It's a tech program. You can get a degree, you got a certificate that says you've completed the course. The course was meant to be like 8 months. I dropped out at the 4-month mark, went home and stuff, started writing Clerks. Scott finished, he finished with Dave Klein, the guy who would go on to be our DP. But this is in like maybe month 2 of going to the Vancouver Film School. Scott and I found a similar sense of humor, started hanging out together and whatnot between classes, during classes, making fun of everything. Oh, these people are stupid, blah, blah, blah. You know, being typical fucking slackers and shit. 20-year-old jackasses. So, fuck, I forgot where I was going with that story. Oh, me and Scott. So me and Scott are downstairs in the little coffee shop at the Vancouver Film School. And we're just talking about bullshit, just making, like, the thing I love to do with my friends, and Brian and Walter, I knew before I met Scott at film school, is the type of humor where you sit around and go like, imagine this, you just build hypotheticals where you're like, yeah man, then this happened. Jason Mewes was always usually the victim of it. We'd be coming home from a comic book show and he had maybe been particularly nice to one dealer and said thank you, and that opened up a little fucking chink in the armor, and the whole ride home we were just like, you want to suck that guy's dick, don't you? Whole ride home, man. And Mewes would be like, yeah, right. First he's a part of it and shit. He's like, yeah, I'll be sucking his dick. You're like, yeah, you totally do. But by the 45-minute mark, as 3 grown adults are telling a 16-year-old kid, you want to suck that guy's dick, all the humor goes away for him, and he just stops paying attention. So he'd start reading a comic, and he would go from like being into it to being like, yeah, you guys are funny, to just flat out ignoring us. So it was kind of merciless. So